Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Oh, welcome in. It's Wednesday. We're making up a show that we missed from earlier in the week because it's been a crazy week here around the Gorilla Sports Studios. But hey, we're getting after it. Got a really exciting show for you guys. I'm going to be joined by Meghan Angley in a moment. And in just a couple minutes, we're going to be joined by Dave McCarthy from Sunday Brunch, NHL Network Radio. Cannot wait to chat with him. But I do want to remind you guys about our great partners over at Trusted American Mortgage. Head on over to trustedamerican.com. Right now, their salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you lower your interest rate, get a better monthly payment. So go to trustedamerican.com right now to see how much money they can help you start saving today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome in Gorilla Sports Off Ice. I'm Jesse Montano. She's Meghan Angley. I'm going to just put you on blast a little bit for a second. Wearing jeans.
Whoa.
I don't know if I've ever seen you in denim below the waist. I've seen you with jean jackets. Yeah.
Jean jackets. I have this all denim, but it's shorts.
Yes.
Like romper.
Yeah.
So
I love it. Love the look. Very season 2 Rachel.
Season 2 Rachel.
Good for you.
Love that. Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me.
We got a fun show today. We are going to be joined by Dave McCarthy in just a moment. We're going to be talking about everything that's going on in Leafs land because, there's a lot going on there. Talk about Mitch Marner a bit, how that maybe fits into the conversation that you and I have had. We're going to touch on some of the rumblings of this summer is already gearing up, Meghan, to be a little bit crazy. There's some reports out there about Brock Nelson. We're going to touch on all that stuff. And then we are going to spend the back half of today's show getting into the Eagles a bit, Meghan, because very suddenly with that brutal Game 7 for the Denver Nuggets, suddenly Colorado's last hope at a championship is up north in Loveland. They got a game tonight against the Abbotsford Canucks. We will be there for that. So we're going to get into all of that. Meghan, before we get to Dave, just anything else here off the top for you?
No, excited to start digging into some of all of this and still stick to Avs topics, but also see how some of these lessons learned from other teams' playoff exits can apply to the Avs.
Yeah, there's a lot, and the Toronto Maple Leafs did officially retie the record for most consecutive Game 7 losses. The Avs broke that record a couple weeks before the Maple Leafs did. But without any further ado, let's get him in here. One of my favorite folks that I have met in the industry, good friend, Sunday Brunch NHL Network, Dave McCarthy. Dave,
Jesse,
how's it going, sir?
I am doing well. Meghan, great to talk to you as well. I didn't know Jesse was a Friends aficionado. What I was going to say was, I guess, Meghan, that's one half of the Canadian tuxedo. So you're having a Canadian on, you're looking apart. Either that or like Gossip Girl Vanessa. But season 2 Rachel is a
Gossip
good
Girl. That's another good one too.
High compliment.
Yeah.
Look, the character had her quirks, but she was a great fashionista.
Dave, I guess just for you, how are things going up there in Toronto? Have you has your schedule settled at all here over the last week, or are you like us? We're kind of ramped up there in that week after.
Well, it's lightened a bit, to put it that way. I was thinking where I would have been on Monday if the Leafs had won Game 7 on Sunday. Would have been right back down for practice at the practice facility, gearing up for Game 1, then into availability today, Game 2 Thursday. It would have been fun, but not the case. It has lightened up considerably. The Leafs had a locker clean-out day, which was a relatively morose affair on Tuesday. And I think safe to say, again, in keeping with another one of the themes that you guys have, a lot of us in Toronto are, using one of these. In this case, a glass of Prosecco to drown what could have been.
You have to take my word for it. This is not Prosecco.
I would never expect Prosecco in a sippy cup like that. Come on, I know you better than that.
You already know that I absolutely love the drink of choice. I love the setup you got going too.
See, I got my locator right there. Eh? Can you read that? It says Toronto on the tin.
Hey, yes, I can. Nice. All right. Dave, like you said, what could have been, I feel partially responsible for what happened to the Leafs because I made a video when they went up 2-0 and I said, hey, they look like they have figured it out. This looks like a force. What happened after that?
Well, I will absolve you of responsibility, Jesse. I've long stopped believing that anything that folks like us say has anything to do with what goes on the ice. So I will absolve you from responsibility. I don't need anyone in Toronto coming at you. No good. No good. Look, we all thought, holy cow, like something's happening here. And then in game 3, they go up 2-0 in the game. And we're all like, oh man, like what are we seeing? But I think a couple of things. Number one, the Panthers were not playing the way they were capable of. And once they started to figure that out, the tides in the series shifted back to the way they should have been. And then the Leafs just stopped getting production from their top players. I don't know what it is, but in games 5, 6, and 7, the core of their team, Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, throughout the history of their runs in the playoffs, always come up small. And when that's the case, you just cannot win. You can talk about the depth, and you need guys like McMahon and Domi and Lorentz and Lawton to chip in, and of course you do. And they did. Pacioretty. Throughout the playoffs, they chipped in and it helped. But ultimately, I don't have to tell you guys who are familiar with what championship hockey looks like on a regular basis. If McKinnon and, back in the day, Rantanen and Landeskog and Makar were not going, you're just not going to get to where you need to be.
Yeah, you can get away with the depth stuff for a game or two, but your stars have to be your stars when it matters the most.
How are you reconciling this exit for the Leafs? On one hand, they won the division and they took the reigning champs to a game 7 under some new leadership, a retooled back end. Are there some positives to take away from this that will get lost in the storyline?
Yeah, there are, Meghan, I think, positives, because this year was about change. It was about changing the way they played to a style that Craig Berube believes, and I have long believed, is much more conducive to playoff hockey. Like the Leafs went through an era, a period of time where it was all about possession and metrics and all of that. And like, it sounds all well and good, but when it comes to possession, hockey is not soccer. Okay. If you were the best possession team in the league, you have the puck like 58 to 60% of the time. Okay. Yeah. That means if you don't know what the hell you're doing when you don't have it the other 40% of the time, you're in big trouble. In soccer, the best teams have the ball 90% of the time. And then, you literally keep your opponent from touching the ball the majority of the game. So I never believed that would work. And especially in the playoffs, when every inch of ice is contested, every puck battle is contested, it's amazing how quickly what you thought you were disappears. On a Monday night in January, you know what? There's probably a lot more room out there than you think. In game 7 in May, it's just not there. So they changed that. They were much better in that regard throughout the regular season. Their scoring went down, but they played a much more sustainable style. And we saw it at times against Ottawa, and they looked like they controlled that series by and large. And we saw it at times in the Florida series, early in the series. They would dump the puck in. They would go in after it. They would be aggressive. And then for whatever reason, when all of the marbles were pushed to the middle of the table, in my mind, and Morgan Riley pushed back at my suggestion, but I mean, when you look at how they played, they kind of reverted back to how they had played in the past, which was East-West hockey, trying to make an extra play. Guys, it was all they could do in game 7 to get the puck to the red line, and then not even get it in deep, but like a lazy flip knocked down at the Panther line, and it's right back down their throat. So that was the most frustrating part, Megan, to answer your question, is that it looked like for long periods of time it was different. And then they had built towards something that was going to yield more success. But when it mattered most, they seemed to abandon it. And now, just because of where they are contractually with a number of their key guys, there will be change, and they will look different from a personnel standpoint next year.
Yeah, the what made me feel the confidence in them through game 2 of that second round is exactly what you're saying. Like, I watched that Ottawa series and I said, yeah, this looks different. Even when Ottawa put that push on, they win 2 games. Everyone, all the jokes, obviously, like, oh, here come the Leafs. They didn't crumble. They looked poised. Like you said, they looked in control of the series, and they got through to the next round, and it felt like that was just continuing. And I completely agree with you. From afar, they looked different. That was what made, it wasn't just like this year's different. Like, no, they actually looked different on the ice to me.
Yeah.
Can you speak to the influence of Berube on the team a little bit more? What kind of a difference does a coach like him bring?
Well, a lot, because he was basically working to overhaul the type of hockey that they played. And that's difficult when you've got a group of guys that are in their 8th year that have been used to playing a certain way, at least for the 5 years that Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas were here, where they instilled, as we talked about, a more puck possession-based style, a style more predicated on skill, really a reluctance for any kind of physicality. That's difficult to break those habits. And it was a long process throughout the regular season where you could see his influence starting to take hold. And then down the stretch where they went on a real good run to solidify first place in the Atlantic Division, that's when we really started to see the team that he had been talking about all year, about how they had to play in order to have success. It was funny. They did the coach availability in their team video room at the practice facility yesterday. And on the wall, the slogans for the team were emblazoned. And one of the slogans was no grit, no grind, no greatness. The other one was North hard. In other words, like Florida Panther hockey. None of this peeling back at the red line and looking for the extra play. Get to the line, dump it in, go in after it, bang away, roll around, generate off the forecheck. It's not as sexy as wheeling up and down the ice coming off the rush, but you can't do that in the playoffs very often. You have to rely on being able to establish a forecheck. And that was his greatest influence. And he was left really quite perplexed after game 5, where it was 2-2. They're on home ice. They lay a complete egg. They go on the road. They play like the perfect game. Like that was a Craig Berube fever dream in game 6. That was exactly what they were talking about. And then, you and I was shocked, honestly, that they were able to pull that off. I thought they were dead in the water after game 5. You come home, game 7, you're feeling good about yourself, and it's the same story. And even within game, guys, it was so frustrating to watch if you're a Leaf fan, because they came out, they got utterly caved in the first 10 minutes. Utterly caved in.
It's crazy.
They survive it. They get away with it. And then in the second period, it was like they said, you thought that was bad. Hold my Prosecco. And then within the span of like 6 minutes, it's 3-0 and it's game over. And it's like, how does that happen? And Berube was left without answers. He said, I do not have an answer as to why that happened. And that's what they're going to have to try to figure out. One, how the roster is going to look next year. And two, how they avoid reverting back to just terrible habits and seizing up when it matters most.
I thought Joseph Woll played well. In your opinion, Dave, does Anthony Stolarz change any of this if he doesn't go out, or do these problems persist either way?
Persist either way. Joe Woll was fine. Anthony Stolarz was very good. Their issue wasn't goaltending. Their issue was that they couldn't get the puck the heck out of their own end.
Yeah.
And that's not the goalie's fault. That's just that you're getting caved in by the other team's forecheck. So no, they didn't lose because of goaltending at all. Joe Woll was very good. They should feel that is one area of their team that they should feel very good about is their goaltending. Whether it be Stolarz, whether it be Woll, they were always left in a position, regardless of who was in the net, to be in a position to win the game by and large if they played properly in front of the goalies.
Before we get to the greater conversation around the Leafs core and what's next for them, I did want to go back to that retooled back end. Now it's made a compilation of a Brandon Carlo, a Tanev, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Did that retool help to improve the bottom line in what you guys needed defensively for the Leafs?
Well, it did. It was substantially better than it's been in many years in Toronto. Tanev was outstanding in so many possible ways, including his leadership. In Game 5, he did nothing wrong at all, but he came out and said, "I'll take responsibility. I've got to be better." That was not the prevailing message that we heard from everybody that talked that day. And there are some that I could point to who ought to have said that long before Chris Tanev said it. But his leadership was outstanding. His ability to adhere to and buy into what Craig Berube wanted was outstanding. He led by example. He would go out, he would take hits to make plays, to get the puck up. He was just really reliable out there. The problem is that they started to show some warts, though, the back end in Game 7. Morgan Rielly struggled mightily. Like he didn't have a good year this year, really, from start to finish. I don't know what it was. I guess when you look back on it over the course of someone's career, not every year is going to be your best year. And this was a bad year for Morgan Rielly. But his first 2 shifts in Game 7 were abysmal, like abhorrent, to the point we were in the press box just looking at ourselves like, get this guy off the ice. Like, love the guy. Like, I have nothing but respect, but he was brutal. And as a result, Carlo was not very good. And McCabe started to handle the puck like a grenade again. And that was concerning. So, was that a bad game? Yes. Is it indicative of a larger issue? It's hard to say because, to your point, Meghan, defensively, I thought they were quite good this year. And then don't forget as well, I like to call him Bobby Benoit with how he played in the first round there. Looking like Bobby Orr. Simon Benoit was outstanding with Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Real quality third pairing. So, we'll see. I'm always of the mind where if you can upgrade your blue line, I would look at it. But compared to where they were in past years, I don't think the blue line is of the utmost of concern heading into the offseason.
Yeah, it is funny you say that because I feel the same way. And we're sitting here talking about the Leafs saying, all right, well, your defense and your goaltending is in good shape. Now, how do you fix the rest of it? Which it's funny. Like Meghan alluded to just a minute ago, and you said off the top, there are changes coming this year, and some of them are going to be out of the Maple Leafs' control. John Tavares do a new deal. Mitch Marner heading towards unrestricted free agency. How do you see this kind of playing out? And then I am going to drill down on Marner a bit here in a second, but just how do you see this playing out?
Well, John Tavares has made it explicitly clear that he would like to return. He's at the point in his life now where the requirement of moving your family and his 3 kids and wife to a different area, away from his parents, is not all that appealing, right? When he came here from Long Island 7 years ago, he didn't have any kids. It was just moving his wife up here, back to where his family was from. Very different point in his life. So that's not appealing at all. He wants to return to Toronto. The question is, do the Leafs want him back? And if he does, which he does, what number is he willing to play at? It's going to be far below 11 a year. That I can tell you. But we saw how Steven Stamkos, that situation played out with Tampa Bay last year, where I think there was an appetite to bring him back, but at the team's number, not his. And ultimately, he felt disrespected to an extent and decided to move on. In a similar position where John's at in his career, having to move his family and all of that. That's going to be the question. Like, if John wants even somewhere around 7, to me, that's too rich. To me, that's too rich. Yeah, I think
that was because that was the number where my head went for Tavares was 7.
Because the issue, Jesse, I think is that if he comes back, I think the goal should be to shift him down the lineup and work as your third line center and try to find a guy who's better than him to play up the lineup. And then if you have Matthews, Guy X, who's better than Tavares at this point in his career, and then Tavares on the third line, now you're cooking. But you can't pay Tavares 7. Like, you need to look at 4. And I don't like, right? If you want to put him in that role, which I think it would suit him better to be in that, because again, his production dried up at the most crucial point in the year, games 5, 6, and 7. And so he ain't getting younger. And so if you bring him back at 7, you expect him to continue playing the role he has. Why would we expect anything to get any better?
You're right.
I think that's foolish. So does he want to play at that number? That'll be up for him to decide. And if the Leafs even want to bring John back. And then when it comes
part of the mix.
Right. And then when it comes to Marner, he was asked specifically, do you want to return? And what he said was, I have loved, notice the tense that I am speaking in, my time in Toronto. I have loved everything about. So do you want to come back? Well, it's just 2 days after we finished. I'm going to sit down with the word yes never came out of his mouth.
Yep. I picked up on the past tense when he was talking. I picked up on the past tense that you're talking about as well. I've loved my time playing for this team. You know, it all sounded very behind him.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make? There's a lot of kind of conflicting reports that there was an extension in the works for Marner in season that he declined and ultimately exercised his no move clause with a Rantanen trade. Do you have any more insight on some of these reports with where Marner's head is at?
Yeah, my understanding is that they wanted to sign him earlier on in the year, and he wanted to wait till after the season was done. And yes, he did decline, as is his right, a trade to Carolina for Mikko Rantanen. And that's going to be the tough part, right? If he ultimately decides to walk out the door, and again, that is his right. That's not going to sit well in the minds of Leaf fans. Like, there's still a good portion of this fan base that have not forgiven Mats Sundin for refusing to waive his no move clause so many years ago. And that was at a different point in his career. Like, he was more at the point that John Tavares is at in his career right now than Mitch Marner is at this point in his career. And so to decline that, ultimately come up small again, prevent the Leafs from getting, again, I don't have to tell you guys how loose the moose gets at this time of year. You know, like all-time playoff performer in the last 20 years. That's something the Leafs could have used. And then walk out the door for nothing. That's it's going to be a lot for people to get over, and it will sully his legacy in a way that's unfortunate for a local guy who was a big part of why this team went from a laughing stock to a really consistent, effective team, albeit unable to push through to where they ultimately wanted to get over the last 9 years. It'll be unfortunate to have that be the case, but I'm telling you that will be the case here moving forward if he ultimately decides to leave.
Yeah.
What about perhaps the influence of pressure from media and fans with Marner's decision to possibly move on? It sounds like there were some incidents with Marner away from the rink that might have been inappropriate and kind of hard to fathom with what we know to be true of the fan base in Colorado.
Yeah. Look, there's two sides of this question here. When it comes to the incidents off the ice, There's no place for that. Somebody posting his home address the other day on Twitter, like that is beyond the pale. And I feel bad for him. I really do. I sympathize. I empathize with him in that circumstance, because that's really scary, right? Like your wife is at home, your kid is at home. If you're not there, you don't know what, like that's really scary. It's completely inappropriate. And there's no place for that. Like complete moron. People who come up to harass him when he's walking his dog or what, like idiots.
Yep. 100%.
But the point being here is that the reason why he has garnered such unusual vitriol really from fans, because oftentimes like that is rare to hear. That happens maybe more in a city like Toronto because again of the years of built up frustration, and then the way in which Mitch at times has conducted himself from a contractual standpoint, which people view as a reason why the team's hands were tied in terms of the ability to build out their team more. So, last contract, it's all this posturing in the media about, we'll go play in Switzerland if you want, like all this. And then he holds out, and then it's a couple of days into camp, and then he gets a deal that still, in my mind, I cannot fathom how he was paid the amount. It was an overpayment. Like, I'm sorry. It just is for that overpayment. And so people view that as tying the Leafs' hands. Okay, that's fine. If you deliver, he has never delivered when it has mattered most. So what people have looked at Mitch as is a guy who demanded everything and more, and a no move clause, which allowed him to make the decision we just talked about.
Yes.
Yep.
And never delivered to the level that the contract suggested. And then what happens is that you get a certain segment of the fan base that are idiots who decide to take it too far. So is he tired of that? Yeah, he probably is. But if he had produced and he had delivered and he had not taken them to the woodshed like he did in that last contract, then the vitriol wouldn't be nearly as high. Right? That's why Matthews doesn't hear it as much. That's why Willie doesn't hear it as much, because quite honestly, those were easy negotiations. You turned around and, Matthews signs at the end of August. No problem. Willie signs 8 years. 8 years. Who signs 8 years in Toronto? Well, Willie did. No problem. Away you go. But with Mitch, it always seemed like it was a battle. And it's pissed people off.
Dave, what's so funny, and we're with Dave McCarthy, NHL Network Radio on Sirius XM Sunday brunch. We've kept you a long time. You've been very generous with your time, so we'll start to wind you down here. But to that point, like there's Avs fans who feel that way about Mikko Rantanen, because he had a holdout moment that went into training camp at one point. But to your point, like Mikko Rantanen did deliver in the playoffs, and people still feel that way. So you stack that on top, and I totally, like you said, the people out there that are idiots are idiots. But there is a portion of this where it's like, hey, if you're gonna be that tough negotiator, you got to understand how that might be viewed. Last one for me, David, and then I'll turn it over to Meghan. I'm sure, we probably got a couple more for you, but I thought Brad Marchand's comments after Game 7 were super interesting about the crowd and about the pressure that is put on this team. I guess just can you speak to that at all? Because, I've been around the NHL for a long time. I've been lucky enough to be to Toronto for several games and All-Star game and stuff like that. And it is just different there.
It is. I love Bradley Marchand so much. Like he is truly the best. And he's in an uncanny position to assess the Maple Leafs, because I wrote in my piece the other day on NHL.com, he is like the Grim Reaper that appears oftentimes at this time of the year to vanquish the hopes of Maple Leafs fans. He's
Yeah.
beat them 5 times in game 7.
It's
It's
crazy.
outrageous. So the fact that he felt that he was in a position to say that shows you how confident he is when it comes to his ability to own the Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
And I think really him and Paul Maurice were patronizing the Leafs a little bit. Like if you're in the Leafs board and you're hearing those two guys go on, like you're just sitting there being like, oh man, Nix, like cut it. You're killing us here. Like that was out of the old respect and the handshake line routine from a few years ago when Sheldon Keefe said against the Lightning when they lost the game, oh, we got more respect in the handshake line. Like, oh my God, come on.
Right.
Look, Paul Maurice said it was close. It was closer than you think. I really don't think he thinks that because it wasn't, and he knows it. It looked like a AAA team against a house league team in game 7. But look, is there pressure here in Toronto? Sure there is. But are you telling me that it's worse than what the New York Yankees or the Boston Red Sox deal with? Or are you telling me if the New York Rangers put out a performance like the Leafs did on home ice in games 5 and 7, that they wouldn't be hearing boos, and that, columnists like Larry Brooks, who are known to be very understanding, kind, generous, aren't going to be tearing them to shreds of paper? Like, come on, right? It should be just as bad. It's not really that bad here. It isn't. There were not many questions that were that pointed at locker cleanout day. A lot of it was, what was it like playing with Mitch this year? And what did you think of Auston in his first year as the cap? Who cares? Right? Like, that's not pointed. That's not pressure. And if anything, they should be thanking Brad Marchand for throwing out that smoke screen over here where we talk about that and not just how poorly they played again when it mattered most. So I just don't buy it. And what I thought was really interesting was what Max Pacioretty said yesterday, a guy who's been through it, captain of Montreal, older guy now, and said, I felt the pressure early in my career. And he said, I didn't necessarily like it as much, but he said, I love it now because it means that it's coming from a place where people care what you do. And he said, I want to be in a scenario where people care what I do, and he embraces it. So it can be hard for younger guys to embrace it. But the point being is that I think there are still some people who think of the Leafs core as young guys. They're not. They're grown-ass men with families now, at least two of them, in Marner and Tavares, and they're closing in on 30. They're not 22 anymore. They're men. So they should be at the point in their career now where they're able to handle it better than they've shown.
Yeah.
I thought Steve Dangle's comments, referring to it as Florida's pity tour, really captured how the compilation of both Tkachuk, Marchand, and Paul Maurice's comments really did feel a little bit patronizing. For what purpose? I'm not really sure. But I guess there were two things, and I can't decide which one I want to ask you.
Ask him both.
Because obviously this team's going to look different moving forward.
Yeah.
And the concern, though, is some of the leaders, the stars on the team stepping up when it's needed most and the inability to do that. Do you have any concern about what that looks like moving forward for players like Matthews, Nylander, a young player like Nyes, who I felt really stepped up in these playoffs?
I mean, Matthew Nyes did not seem to shrink under the pressure at all. In fact, it looked the opposite with him. His game continued to get better. And he was the very personification up front of what Craig Berube was looking for, that physical style, dump it in, get after it, get to the net. He talked to me yesterday about how as the year went on, he started to understand better how to use his size to his advantage. And like this guy, he is built like a condominium. If he decides that he's interested in going to the net, there's not too many guys in the league that are going to be able to stop him. So he didn't seem to shrink under the pressure. I'm not worried about Matthew Nyes at all. In fact, it's a guy that we talked about as being a potential future captain.
Yeah, hang some
of this
hope
team.
on that.
for real, right? So, look, I don't think I probably wouldn't have named Matthews the captain just because it doesn't, and it's not an indictment on him. Look, Nate McKinnon's not the captain
Right.
in Colorado, right? Like, but he's okay. I think Auston Matthews is a guy who is best when you leave him to be the best player on the ice, and let the leadership responsibilities fall more on someone else. I don't think it's an indictment on him to say that's probably better to be the case. So, look, Auston Matthews is going to be a really effective player for this Maple Leafs team if they're to ever win anything. But when you look at the core, him, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, they're all kind of cut with the same cloth. Like they really don't seem to get all that worked up about all that much. Unlike Nate McKinnon, quite honestly, who I think could be a captain if the opportunity was there. But I think Landeskog's the same type of guy, so there's no issue there. But when what was it, 3 years ago, but the year before they won the cup, when he came out and said, "I've been here, 8 years? I've won." I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this, so I won't.
Yep.
But you guys remember the quote. And then I think it was last year where he's like, "Yeah, I feel like I just wasted 9 months of my life."
Yep.
Like that's a guy who's hell bent on winning. And Matthews' response after Game 7, when asked what went wrong, was, "I don't know." Like it just doesn't resonate the same way, which is why I think they should. I'm not saying strip it because that's a whole. We don't have time to get into that. But I just wouldn't have gone down that road in the first place because I don't think it's in his best interest to be burdened by those responsibilities.
Nathan McKinnon stormed out of an interview the other day at World Championships because they lost the game.
You must be finished. That was a hilarious transcript, but I can only imagine the live thing was.
Yeah. He said, "You must be finished."
Yeah, because they had lost to Finland, and he asked the reporter on the way out. He told the reporter, "You must be finished" or something. And then stormed out.
Wow, I love it. See, that's the difference. He runs over there. Sidney Crosby, who needs the World Championships like a hole in the head, runs over there, and he's back checking like his life depends on it. Yeah, I don't know. Those are specimens.
Might be cut from a similar cloth.
Yeah,
he's a fun player to watch. All right, I'll leave it there. The other side of the question I wanted to ask was the Florida of it all. What separated them from not just Toronto, but even after one game against Carolina? Yeah, it just feels like they're the team to beat. And I'm not sure if the Avs were still playing hockey right now that they'd be able to survive a Stanley Cup final against Florida with the way that they look right now.
Yeah. Dave, you've been awesome, man. Thank you so much for parking a good amount of time here. And hey, let's have you back on this summer as we get into free agency and see where all this stuff shakes out.
Yeah, I would love it. Thanks for having me, guys. You guys do great work, so it's a pleasure to be on with you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dave. It's Dave McCarthy, Sunday Brunch on NHL Network Radio. Like I said, one of the best in the biz. Always love chatting with Dave. Thanks for helping nail that down, Meghan.
Oh my God, of course.
That's great.
Not that I think there's so many parallels between Toronto and Colorado, but it gives greater appreciation to conflict like filling a 2C position. To hear him talk about Tavares as a 3C is a little crazy to me, just looking at the Avs situation, the room that we're in, where we're like, Brock Nelson could be a 2C, and well, Charlie Coyle's our 3C right now. And I don't know, maybe he could play up as a 2C as needed until they really finalize the 2C position. It just, some teams have it figured out, like a Florida, but the ones that don't, it is a really hard position to fill. And that is not to give the Avs front office this total pass in not being able to lock it down after Kadri, but it is a very hard thing to do.
No, and honestly, Meghan, I didn't even think about it like that, but it does serve as great perspective where it's like, here's Toronto, which is currently on the longest playoff streak in the NHL, active playoff streak, I believe 9 straight years. And that's a team that's like, yeah, I don't know, we need someone better. And you know what else I think it is too, and this is based on a lot of what he was saying and what he just said there about the core 4 at the end, it's all very samey.
I'm so glad he answered that question in that way, because I didn't ask it in this should Matthews be the captain kind of way, because that felt mean. And it's nothing against Matthews, but he's right. The leadership core on any team needs to be constructed with a couple different types of leaders, different types of voices by necessity, because too much of the same, and then that's the same message. And when that message is no longer resonating, nobody's listening.
And you know, it's since changed, and you give Connor McDavid a lot of credit. You know, they've turned that team into a team that can just score more goals than everyone else to perennial cup contention. But I, for a long time, remember thinking that I don't know if McDavid should be the captain there. There's already so much that's asked of him on the ice, so much that's asked of him in terms of carrying the team. Is it also fair to ask him to go out and have to take responsibility for everything when he, you know, for many years, Connor McDavid was like, all right, well, you lost 7-5 and Connor McDavid had 4 goals and an assist, but he's the captain, so he's going to go take responsibility for it. And again, that has since changed, but you know, I definitely hear where Dave's coming from. Like, is that a responsibility that you need to be putting on Matthews?
Yeah. Can it be represented in a different player too? Because I do think you need a guy who has a little bit of bite. So to hear him talk about Tanev's impact, it doesn't surprise me after just what we learned out of the Dallas series. In the absence of Tanev and the difference that he made, it was really clear to me. Look, Dallas still beat Colorado, but Tanev's absence from that series was certainly felt almost single-handedly. And to hear the type of leader he is and the type of care that he has, the accountability that he has, it kind of reminds me too of Pacioretty's comments that Dave brought up in the show about how it's important to have reasons to care, and sometimes that really sticks a little bit later in the career. And I do wonder, we talked about this with Brock Nelson, 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door. I don't doubt his compete, but I just wonder if that homegrown care that we talked about, we use the word brotherhood. I think that kind of thing matters, and it needs to come from some place. And that's sort of the key ingredient that I think was missing from Brock Nelson in Colorado, that I think even Brock Nelson in New York with the Islanders was different than the Brock Nelson the Avs got.
Yeah. Just real quickly to your point about Tanev, like Nathan McKinnon, for my money, was the runaway best player in this series against the Avs and Stars.
He'd be on top of the pyramid.
And well, not even that. But I was just saying that you couldn't say that last year because Tanev contained him.
Shut Nathan McKinnon down.
Right. So how much Nate was able to impact the series this year versus last year is that's Tanev right there.
Right. It was a lot more by committee, the way in which Dallas shut down McCann. And they did a good job of it even
100%.
still, but it was more fallible and there were more ways around it for Colorado than before. It just felt like there wasn't a clear path through Tanev last series.
Yeah. That wasn't meant to be a pyramid call out.
He was so mad that we put Logan O'Connor.
I was not mad. I was laughing. So I was like, yeah, this is a pyramid Megan's in charge of. Meghan, I did want to mention this before, because I do want to shift a little bit towards talk a little bit about Marner and a little bit of the other stuff before we transition to putting a bow on everything with some Eagles stuff. I don't know if you listened to 32 Thoughts this week, but Elliot Friedman, I almost said Evgeny Friedman. Elliot Friedman.
Alternate ego.
Did say that as part of a potential deal that would have brought Mikko Rantanen to Toronto, that there was a team that was asking for Nyes, and that the Maple Leafs apparently said, no, we're just not prepared to go there. Well, given what Dave just said about Mitch Marner turned down the trade to go to Carolina, that tells me that the team that was probably asking for Nyes was likely the Colorado Avalanche.
So I don't know how to read that, because Evan Roal said it was Carolina and Dave said it was Carolina. So I just don't know, like, would this have been
about Nyes?
Yeah, would this have been a piece Carolina was interested in?
Wait, did Dave just say that? Did I miss that?
Well, he didn't say Nyes specifically then, but he did talk about Marner blocking the trade to Carolina specifically. So I don't know why, but to me that felt after the Colorado part. And I think Evans kind of corroborated that. I don't have that hard confirmed. I would have loved for Colorado to be interested in Nyes. I want to make that very clear. That is a player that would fit in Colorado so well.
Yeah.
I almost don't want to entertain that it was Colorado interested in Knies and this didn't come to fruition, because it would upset me because he would fit in so well here. And so I don't even want to entertain it like, oh, that could have happened or almost happened, because he is the exact type of player that just would have complemented the top six. It's not to say that it's totally absent. I think that players like Nichushkin and Lehkonen can bring about a style of play like what Knies brought to the Leafs in this playoff run, but in such a young player with the skill upside that he has, and then the size, just the power that he plays with. It's like what was missing from Val Nichushkin in this playoff run that left me wanting that Knies brought for the Leafs. So I almost don't want to entertain it.
And I mean, I guess there could have been a couple different swings that the Hurricanes took at trying to get that deal over the line. But I did just find it interesting when I heard Elliot Friedman talk about that. I said, man,
that would have been really nice.
That would have been interesting. Because to your point, the size, 6'3", 200 and some change. Mikko Rantanen, 6'4", about 215. So, you again, not this isn't meant to be like an indictment on Marty Netchus. They still got a very good player.
No, just different.
A little bit. Just different.
I always felt too that Rantanen, for his size, didn't always leverage it the way that you hope to see. Whereas I think Knies plays that way.
Yeah.
And that is not an unnecessary jab at Mikko Rantanen, because when he does utilize his size, I do think he comes away with speed and the size that helps him to win. So not a dig at Rantanen, just would have loved Knies in Colorado.
For sure. Meghan put out a post, or Meghan, Chloe put out a post the other day from a show that we did last week where we were talking about Mitch Marner. And what Chloe put on the post was, would you want to see the Colorado Avalanche pursue Mitch Marner? Overwhelmingly no was the response in a lot of the comments. But Meghan, I don't care. I think assuming he does get there, and look, this is still, I think, a bit of a pie in the sky thing with how it all would fit. I think he would play so well next to Nathan MacKinnon. I still think if you got a chance to take a swing on Mitch Marner, you should if you're the Avs.
I'm sure you can tell by how I've answered this each time that I'm not sure on Marner.
For sure. Yeah.
And I love that you love Marner, because I'm not anti-Mitch Marner. I do agree that Nathan MacKinnon seems to adore him and love playing with him, and Four Nations was a huge
Couldn't
teaser
say enough good things about
of
him.
that potential. I don't know if I'm going to articulate this well, but in talking about what Knies would have brought to the top six instead of a player like Netchus, I worry that what Marner would bring to the top six is a higher skill ceiling than what Netchus brought, which isn't to take away from what Netchus can bring, but still lacking in this. It's not intangible too. It's something you can definitely describe, but it's like grit, sandpaper, relentless compete. And I feel bad saying that about a player like Marner, who I do think is a highly competitive, highly skilled player. I just feel like he wouldn't bring enough of what I'm trying to describe there. And it would be a little too samey then. I don't know that it'd be so different from what we saw out of Netchus. And the concern a little bit is rising to the occasion in big moments, because we just watched as some of Colorado's own stars struggle to do that where they previously haven't. And in seeing players that they brought in newly, like Brock Nelson and Netchus, also struggle with that. A Charlie Coyle, who has so much playoff experience, that's not something I'm willing to take a gamble on right now. I almost defer to like the Pacioretty comments of a little bit of experience with guys who know how to embody that. It's very much like the qualities that Tkachuk have and Gabriel Landeskog have. That type of player is what the top six needs. And I just don't know that Marner is that type of player. He's still a good player that would help their top six. I just think that's represented a little bit already in how it's constructed. And you would need to reevaluate then how the top six is constructed, and still bring in that type of player that I'm having a hard time describing.
Well, so my first thing with Marner is he really is a player. Let me tell you why I think he's different than Marty Netchus relative to what you were just explaining. Marty Netchus came from an organization and a system that emphasized everything that you were just talking about. Good habits, working hard, below the goal line, winning battles, all that. And I think it's why he didn't fit there. That's just not the type of player he is. I think a lot of people out there think that Mitch Marner is going to be better away from Toronto. He's in that core. And like what Dave was just talking about, they all just reverted back to the old habits, old tendencies when they got put up against it. I think whether it's in Colorado or wherever, I think Mitch Marner is going to stand to benefit from being somewhere new. I think he's going to be the ultimate change of scenery type guy. I also think this is a right-handed shot. He's a 100-point player, highly skilled. Where I agree with you is that if you're doing this, this is that aggressive path that we've talked about for the Avs. I do think that means a retooling of what you're seeing in the top six. I would actually argue that, and now again, I'd almost think you'd need to swap him and him for Marty Netchis out. But like, I actually think the top six has a lot of what you were just talking about. Like that second line for this last playoff run was Gabe Landeskog, Brock Nelson, Val Nichushkin. I think Nate embodies a lot of what you're talking about. I mean, Nate's like the ultimate kind of, he does everything, but you've got Nate and you've got Lecky. So for me, can you get the Mikko Rantanen thing back? The super high skill offensive force to fit into that top six. And that's what I think Mitch Marner is. I think Marty Netchis could be that as well. If you want to just run it back and, play it safe. I think Marty Netchis with a full year next to Nathan McKinnon. Sure. I think he could be in that realm. I just think Mitch Marner is an elite, skilled, talented player. And if you can get him in free agency, doesn't cost you anything but money. I think that's something you need to take a look at when you've got players like Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar right now ready to win. And especially when you saw that Nathan McKinnon playing next to Mitch Marner, they've got some nice chemistry there. He's a player that Nate likes to play with. And I just think that he'll benefit from being away from Toronto. That all said, I totally get where everyone's coming from.
Well, and I think the trouble I'm having is, okay, I do kind of agree. I was inching towards, you probably have to move on from Netchis as part of the top six picture if you're envisioning Marner there. This also still feels it comes at the expense of the 2C position. And that feels like a necessary engine for the top six that has not been resolved. And so I worry that it's like a puzzle in my Nancy Drew computer games that I play a lot.
Present tense.
Yeah, over COVID, I revisited them. They're so much fun.
Love it.
And it just still feels like this actually, it's like you're one move away from solving the puzzle, but there's a piece blocking it. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like Marner would be the piece blocking it because it blocks the 2C position from being filled in my eyes. And that's where there's still a huge concern that needs to be resolved. But it's not anti-Marner. I do agree that he'll probably find more success outside of Toronto. Yeah. Change of scenery, I think, certainly is needed for this player. It's just the puzzle isn't fully coming together in my eyes for Colorado. I
mean, like I said, to me, if you're taking a Marner or that level of swing, you are going and again, I'm going to spit out some hypothetical, like you're trading Val Nichushkin. You're moving on from Sam Girard, and that's how you solve the 2C. Like, I think to your point, if you're going down that road, you are taking the puzzle pieces and shifting them around to make it fit. Which again, I feel it's far more likely that they go the run it back route than that route.
Yeah.
But again, like I just think that this front office, especially led by Chris McFarland, has shown if there's a big name player out there that we think makes us better, we are going to explore that option. And I just look at it and say, I know Nathan McKinnon really likes this player. So I just sit there and say, do I think that if you built it right, Mitch Marner could be really good for this team? Yeah, for sure. But I completely agree with what you're saying. There's pieces blocking that you'd have to retool to make that all work.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense.
So that's he's a 100-point player. He's a 100-point player. So when people say, why would you want him? He's a 100-point
right.
player.
I'm not sitting here like you're the most ridiculous person ever for suggesting this. If there were fewer rules, like with the cap and just unlimited money.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He'd make a lot of sense.
Yep.
And I love the Gabriel Landeskog being in this equation call out too, because that is a huge piece in their top six. We didn't get a full regular season of runway to talk about and evaluate. That will make a huge difference for them. And honestly, they have a lot of work to do with their third line too. I think this team will look different in more ways than, like, I think they're going to run it back in a lot of ways, but I also think it's going to look different than we expect.
Yeah. Last note before we run through what we're going to go up to Loveland and watch tonight. Bowen Byram. Elliot Friedman reports that the Buffalo Sabres are officially gauging interest. This isn't them, being willing to talk if other teams bring up Bowen Byram. No, it does sound, Elliot Friedman is reporting that the Buffalo Sabres are now officially reaching out to teams saying, what would you pay? What is the interest on a player like Bowen Byram? So for how much grief the Avs have gotten for it not working out with Casey Middlestat, neither ends of this trade seem to be working out for where the players originally landed.
I'm not surprised. Byram is a player that has always had, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to say, ambitions, obviously, but he's had his sights set on a specific vision for himself and where he wants to go in his career. He wants to be a top pair guy, and I think he wants to win. And the lack of winning in Buffalo points to a player that would definitely experience unrest in that situation and want something different. And so I think this is a mutually agreed upon thing between Byram and the organization to yield some kind of return too, but it doesn't surprise me that it didn't work out for Byram in Buffalo.
Yeah. I genuinely, Meghan, I thought Buffalo was an odd fit for him because of what you just said, that like it is pretty well known that he wants to be a top pairing guy, set and forget, because he thinks that that's the level that he can play at. And the team that traded for him has spent 2 first overall picks on defensemen within the last 10 years.
Right.
I guess
you're competing with Darlene. You're competing with power.
And it's just like, I just thought that was kind of an odd fit. It felt like we were on this collision course pretty immediately, in my opinion.
I think there's more players that are going to want to be traded out of Buffalo this summer.
It's just, and we should we should park some time to talk about Buffalo. Maybe we even find someone.
I love this idea
because, like, Meghan, I genuinely can't even understand what's happening there. Like, I've made the joke to you off air, like, even really, really, really bad teams accidentally make the playoffs once in 14 years. Like, what is happening there? It's different coaches, it's different GMs, it's different captains, it's different regimes of players. Like, I don't get it.
And they've had different marquee talent over time. That's obviously changed and some has exited, but Tage Thompson alone is still such a good player that we don't get to talk about very much because of the state that Buffalo is in. But I think he belongs in some of these top of the league conversations that we have about other players. He's absent from them because of the confusion that is Buffalo at the moment. And it's weird to me.
Well, and I mean, like, I think you and I were even watching a game of theirs this year. I don't remember when or where, but we were just like, how does this team suck? Like, like you said, Tage Thompson, Jason Zucker's a quality piece.
I've always loved Jason Zucker.
Alex Tuck, quality piece. Peyton Krebs, good young player. Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin, Bowen Byram, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's a good young goaltender.
Yeah, I think, he's experienced the growing pains of a young goaltender too. I feel like young goalies at this period of their development do have some fluctuations. And so I think he's had, what's felt like steps backwards that I also think are just kind of normal for a goaltender. And so I still think that he can provide, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just adequate enough goaltending for them that he's not the problem. He's not a part of the problem, and he can be a part of a future solution in net for them. But, Samuelson, a player on their back end that's just dealt with injury that's kept him from being an option more regularly for them on defense. And
Jack
that's
Quinn,
been tough.
JJ Peterka,
JJ Peterka is the name that I think is not going to be with the Buffalo Sabres anymore.
Interesting.
And then it's where they've lost these marquee players. They haven't really replenished them, right? Casey Middlestat, look, I know it didn't work out, but that was once upon a time kind of a player at the top of the lineup regarded as a kind of a star for them. And they've just sort of lost all the star power and haven't really brought it back in.
Well, and in certain cases, not all, like you said, but there's been probably one too many documented cases of players leaving Buffalo and going on to be good elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that's got to be another problem for them as well.
Right. They need to evaluate the retention rate issue, the turnover issue.
Right. All right, Megan, let's just kind of quickly, let's talk about technically round 3 of the AHL playoffs.
Yes. Did you want to address Brock Nelson to Minnesota? It's becoming
yes.
more and more pointing to that being the likely outcome. I know we've talked on our shows like, yeah, Avs should sit down and have a conversation with him. I think it's fair to kind of rule him out of the equation for Colorado's future 2C spot next year.
I agree with you. My guess is they probably did sit down and chat, and I'm sure Brock Nelson was very respectful about it. Of like, I want to see what else is out there. I want to test my options. I want to move back home and go play in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I have, and you and I have talked about this on the show, off the show. I have kind of in my head have had that penciled in as probably not. You got to have the conversation, but probably not. And there are reports out there this week that multiple reports out there this week that yes, Brock Nelson does want to go to free agency and see what's out there.
Okay. Now we're back in this room with the Avs need a 2C. And honestly, I don't mind being in this room. I already was sort of one foot in the door of this room. I'm not sure Brock Nelson is the right 2C for Colorado. Still think he's a good player. Can understand why they were interested in him in the first place. But if Tavares isn't even being considered for a 2C spot in Toronto, I just think we need to dream bigger than Brock Nelson. Yeah,
no, I'm with you. Megan, the Colorado Eagles are in the Pacific Division Finals right now for the American Hockey League. Playoff format's a little bit different for the AHL. Travel and where teams are at and things like that. It's a little bit different, but that series is tied 1-1. It's a best of 5. We're heading up to Loveland tonight to see what's going on.
Yeah, I feel bad too. I might have shared with some people that it was a best of 7. It is a best of 5. It'll become best of 7 for the conference final next round. And there's some COVID years to factor in here. And so the playoff format in some of the early seasons for the Colorado Eagles has looked a little different. So by my mark, this is the furthest they've advanced in their history as an AHL team, with the potential to solidly advance the furthest than they have in their history as an AHL team. It's been an incredible season for the Eagles. So this is not an easy series. Abbotsford, this is a kind of a rematch from last year. They were ousted by Abbotsford in the first round last year. That's a best of 3 first round. It's always really, really tough. But they have a chance to kind of rectify that. And it's a good Abbotsford team. The series is tied and the Eagles come in on the heels of a pretty big win. They're getting goal scoring throughout the lineup right now. They're dealing with some injuries to their back end. Jack O'Shawn hasn't been a player available to them, but players like Brian Yoon have stepped up in his absence. And it's been huge for them. Brian Yoon had a multi-point game in game 2 in this Abbotsford series. So what they've built culturally is why I get excited about the potential for this Eagles group, because that next man up, you hear it talked about on any hockey team anywhere. But to truly embody that, to have players step in and step up and be able to make an impact, I think it's huge. And the depth that they have to choose to play a Taylor McCarr and Oscar Olausen on any given night and have healthy scratches like that in the rotation is pretty impressive. Matthew Steinberg returned to the playoffs, and I don't know if he was dealing with something a little bit throughout this time too, but he served his suspension. With the Avs earlier when we saw him on the Landeskog night where we were talking about the roster. Is he in for game 2 in the Dallas series? Yeah. Steinberg was in this lineup as a scratch. They called him up to have him serve his suspension. So it's done, but Matthew Steinberg returned. He played an Aaron Schneekloth identity too that he's really drilled into his team is why I think this team works so well. It's not a one-line team. In terms of production, they lean very heavily on like Jason Megna, Matthew Phillips, Ty Felleber, but they're getting contributions all over the lineup because they're being deployed pretty evenly line by line because they got to win battles, and Abbotsford is a team with a lot of poise and a lot of depth of their own and good goaltending. So it's going to be a tough series. I have nerves going into tonight because I hate that it's a best of 5 almost. I think the lack of the runway like you would have in a best of 7, it just makes every game that much more important. And the regular season record, Eagles have played good against Abbotsford at home, but Abbotsford has come ahead in that season series previously. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, so I was going to point out, and I'm pulling this second thing up.
Ivan had a goal.
I mean, this is for lack of a better comparison, this is a little bit of the Avs and Dallas Stars thing here. You're talking about teams that finished 3rd, the Eagles, and 5th, the Canucks, overall in the American Hockey League. So, like, it's not just that these are the top 2 teams left in the Pacific Division. These are 2 of the top teams in the American Hockey League all year long. And so, I just wanted to call that out to the point that you made earlier of like, yeah, the Eagles are a top team in the league, but this is a dogfight of a series that they're in right here. They finished ahead of the Canucks by 2 points to win the Pacific Division and end up 3rd in the American Hockey League. Get home ice, which is what we're going to see play out here for anywhere from 2 to 3 more games this week. But yeah, this is similar to what we saw from the Avs, where it's like, yeah, these are 2 of the top teams going at it a couple rounds before the finals.
And I love that the Eagles have the home ice advantage bringing the series back home because they do play very well at home. I'm glad they stole one on the road because Abbotsford had the 2nd best home record in the league behind the Eagles. So to steal one on the road was huge. And Trent Miner is the other piece in all of this. Round by round now through this point has been excellent for the Eagles in net. And he is one of the best save percentages of all of the goalies in the Calder Cup playoffs at the moment with a .935. So he has kept them in games, has settled down games when they start to get a little bit out of hand, and he's a huge piece for why they've had success this postseason.
Well, and you're now also at the point, like, this is the 3rd series that Abbotsford has had to play. The Eagles got that bye. Like, in theory, this is where you should be able to start leaning on a little bit of that rest. You're not quite as banged up as you get a little bit deeper here into this series that, yeah, finish every check. Make every guy feel it because they're feeling it just a hair more than you are.
Yeah, and that's where I think Colorado's depth is huge. You know, I love some of these lines. TJ Tynan, Chase Bradley, Chris Wagner, Matt Steinberg, Mark Senden, who I've talked about on here very briefly. I love him. Oscar Olausen, Ivan, Jake Wise, John-Luc Foodie, Ty Philibert, Jason Megna, Matthew Phillips. I don't know. I kind of like all of those lines. No, I really do. They've got a guy who's going to battle and come up with pucks on each of those lines. They've got some responsible centers down the middle for each of those. They've got some skill players like in Ivan and Foodie and Tynan. And so it's just really well balanced.
Yeah. Megan, any final thoughts for today?
No, let's get up to Loveland.
Yeah, I'll say let's get out of here. We got a drive to make, so we're going to get up there and do that. But Pucks and Prosecco coming tomorrow.
Yes.
Right?
We have a fun show planned for you guys.
I saw some of the graphics that Chloe was working on. So we'll be back at it with that tomorrow. And then, like I said, we're heading up to Loveland right now. So keep it locked in for any of that content coming. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. We got Chloe Thiel behind the glass today. That's going to do it as Gorilla Sports Off Ice, brought to you guys by our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon. We'll talk to you guys later. See ya.